Hey everybody, Mr. Musak back here again. We're starting a new unit on the 1920s, also known as the Roaring Twenties, because of all the awesome things that happened then. Considered one of the probably best of times and the worst of times that happened in American history in the 1920s. So, talk about a few things here. Remember, post World War One, we talked about this before we left for the break. A lot of soldiers return home. The U.S. Does not sign the Treaty of Versailles. They stay out of the ideas of overseas entanglements. They don't want to be part of the League of Nations. Leave us alone. We want to be our own country, right? There's also a little short post-war recession, a time where the economy is bad because war ends. Factories retool. They go from making war stuff like guns and bullets and planes and tanks to making, consumer goods. And we see this big change happen there. So we have this big recession here, but after the recession, we see the 1920s be one of the most prosperous times in U.S. history, where all kinds of new goods get created, tons of stuff gets made, a lot of people have jobs, wages go up, a lot of good things happen, but there's that little hiccup to start things off. Remember, also, women get suffrage at this time. The 19th Amendment is passed in 1920. They've been fighting for it since the 1840s, and so election of 1921 is the first election where we see women start voting, and a lot came due to that. We see Warren G. Harding as our first president here in the 1920s, and he was the first president that was in office for when women could vote for president. Now, he ran on this idea of a return to normalcy. Obviously, we had this big issue of World War One, all the stuff that went down. He wanted to get us back to normal, back to being the U.S. Okay, he said we're gonna all this stuff of World War One, we're gonna get rid of it, pacify, we're done, back to normal. He want to lower taxes, drop taxes down, help people out. People like that a lot. He promoted less business regulation. We saw all those progressive movements with labor and hours and unions, all kind of stuff. Less regulations, trying to give business more power again. He promoted what was called isolationist ideas. Basically, the country staying by itself, not getting involved in world conflicts, those kind of things. So, of course, no League of Nations. Now, one of his groups that he worked with were his advisors. Okay, they have his cabinet. He also had his informal advisors. They're known as either the Ohio Gang or his poker buddies, because these were his informal advisors from back home where he was from in Ohio. And a lot of those were his really close friends who were his advisors, and then some were there to really help him out. Some were really smart people, some weren't so great. He got a lot of his advice from this small group. Now, he was at the time considered an attractive man. You may make your own judgments later on. He was known to have lots of girlfriends besides his wife. And there's lots of rumors and conspiracies about his actions that he did. Not that that makes anybody a good or bad president, but it's kind of one of those black marks on his career. He was 51 when he went to office. Some of his known mistresses were as young as 22, those kind of things. But he gets some, a little bad rap for that. Biggest thing you remember is isolation, okay? That we don't want to get involved with other stuff. A little cartoon down there about keep out of Europe. We don't want to get involved in another European conflict, another bad war where we bring our soldiers into is one thing we really want to stay out of. We also see something called the Fordney-McCumber Tariff. You remember down here by the Fordney-McCumber? Yeah, anyway. Kind of funny in the bottom picture there. Basically, a tariff being a tax on imports. And the Fordney-McCumber Tariff was one of the highest tax on imports, highest tariffs in U.S. history. You do this to support American businesses. Think about it. If the U.S. makes steel at $10 a ton, and they can make steel in Britain at $5 a ton, they can sell for a lot cheaper price here in the United States than the British could. So U.S. puts a $6 tariff on steel. Now all of a sudden, steel is being sold for $11 a ton here to make up that tariff, and $10 a ton for U.S. steel. And people have to buy the U.S. goods because they're cheaper than that price. It does kind of hurt us though, because then overseas they don't buy as much of our stuff, but that's a whole other story. We also see a big shift in the middle class here. Okay, middle class people really stop promoting progressive ideas. Okay, the ideas of like help the poor, help business, those kind of help the poor people, and start trusting big business. They kind of say, okay, business got us here, business helped us out. We're gonna ride with the business guys instead of that. But we have this huge economic boom though. Okay, government was truly pro-business. The government literally just helped out big business. They passed laws to help businesses get bigger, help make more money. Now, because business made more money, people had what's called discretionary income. Discretionary income is extra money people had to spend on extra things. Okay, obviously you have the money you need for like food and shelter, those kind of things. This is now like extra goods, like luxury goods. Okay, things today like, Xboxes and big screen TVs, which you may consider a need, they're really just a luxury and extra thing you have. This is the first time where people had money to start buying extras. And we start seeing a higher standard of living at this time. Is that people started having more and more material things. Okay, people wanted more of these goods, to make their lives look better. And it almost kind of creates this whole thing of a consumer culture. Basically, the idea that you're only doing good if you have more stuff. And people start trying to keep up with each other to see if they can get more stuff. Like, if your neighbor buys a new car, you get a new car too. Neighbor builds a bigger house, you build a bigger house too, so on and so forth. The question is, why does this happen? First off, we talked about Harding's plan. He slashes taxes. That means more money to the people. And so that's part of it, more money, those kind of things. You have cheap fuel. The idea of oil, start using oil for fuel versus coal. These are a lot cheaper products, you save this that way. They actually have something called this time the gospel of big business. Basically the idea that we're going to trust those big business guys like your Carnegies and your Rockefellers of old, and you're going to put your faith in them because, they know what they're doing. And so it's kind of the idea of almost like a religion this time, like, okay, we trust these big business guys to help make our decisions, but we're going to do stuff. Also, we see productivity go up. We got more efficient. Instead of working harder, we started working smarter. We started making more goods per hour versus just trying to crank out more goods by brute force. And you kind of think about the idea of consumer culture here. I shop, therefore I am is a big part of it, okay? People like to shop, people like to get things. And that was kind of one big part of the culture at this time. Labor changes a lot too. This guy named Frederick Taylor, his picture's up there. He was an engineer who studied the idea of scientific management. He wanted to try and get more efficiency, more productivity out of workers. Don't just have workers work harder, have them work smarter. So he actually would have people train on just one job. Instead of one person know how to make a whole product, just learn how to make one little part of the product. Actually train your workers. And actually started doing things like training classes and training books, those kind of things to help workers in factories. Instead of saying, here, you're making steel, learn how to do it. The idea was to work harder, work smarter instead of working harder. And you see things like the assembly line come out of there. We also see labor change a lot. The idea of unions, those kind of things that we saw come to power in the late 1890s, early 1900s. Companies started using yellow dog contracts and blacklisting. Basically, they wouldn't allow people to join the union. You had to sign a contract that says, I will not join the union in a yellow dog contract. They would blacklist workers who were known to join unions. That way unions didn't happen in their factories. At the same time, though, other companies decided to use something called welfare capitalism. That companies decided to take care of their workers instead. So there'd be no need to unionize. They built like company towns with like clinics and parks and insurance and stock options, those kind of things. Kind of started giving bonuses and like we call them a fringe benefit today to their workers, so they wouldn't have to worry about wages and those kind of things so much. And so it's kind of how businesses start changing a little bit. Now today, insurance plans, those kind of things are part of almost everyday jobs. That's when this becomes popular. You start getting insurance, that kind of stuff, as part of your labor force. Big thing for teenagers, obviously, is the idea of the car. Now, the car was not a new invention. It came around late 1890s, but this guy up on top here, Henry Ford, he changed the idea of the car. He brings out the idea of the Model T, okay? The Model T was a very cheap, inexpensive car that was standardized, okay? All the parts were the same. You can go in any color you wanted as long as that color was black. Yes, it's a joke. He was making a joke. But he also used the assembly line. He's able to crank out more and more cars by putting on an assembly line and being able to build these cars very, very fast, very, very cheaply, and try to make cars affordable for the people. Okay. He also would take some of those profits he made off these cars and pass them along to the workers. Ford workers got paid very, very well. Okay, they got $5 a day. Okay, that was a big deal back then, and they worked 8 hours a day. 8-hour days. Great pay for the time. Trying to give some of that power back. I'll flip back here one slide if I can. It actually changed the idea. It started seeing things like Detroit, Michigan, Gary, Indiana. These cities became huge because all devoted to the car making, especially in terms of like the city of Detroit, where he started making his cars. Obviously, Detroit basketball team called Detroit Pistons. That's why, because of the car industry. Also, cars changed a lot of things too. General Motors came up with on Chevy and Pontiac, those kind of places. They made less standard cars. Their car wasn't necessarily like Model T, where it was all the same. They started making fancier cars. With fancier cars, saw kind of that, kind of scale of who's rich, who's poor, that kind of thing happens there too. You start seeing roads getting built all over the place. You start seeing, relaxation. You go just drive around someplace. You saw other industries start popping up. Things like restaurants people to drive to, filling stations that you need to fill for gas. The idea of tourism and camping, those kind of things came around as well. You needed to make things for the cars, things like petroleum and gas and steel and rubber, that kind of stuff all came a part of it. Also, you have to live so close to your job that you could drive to work. And honestly, for the biggest part, it was for teenagers. Teenagers had freedom now. You could get away from the house, get away from your parents, those kind of things, and that made a big change in terms of transportation and time. The airplane comes around as well. The airplane has honestly been around since 1903, so it's been around for almost 17 years at this point. But now U.S. started building planes not just for war things. You saw airmail, so you transport letters across the country and across the ocean a lot faster. In 1927, a guy named Charles Lindbergh, here's a picture of him here. Oh, he's in the back there. Charles Lindbergh, my picture got covered up. He crossed the Atlantic Ocean in a non-stop trip in 1927 in his plane called Spirit of St. Louis. Amelia Earhart was the first woman to do it a year later. And by the end of the 1920s, we start seeing actual airliners, like you see in the top here, a Ford Tri-Motor up on the top here. That was one of the first airlines to transport people around. Today, obviously, traveling by air is no big deal. But that was a huge, huge change there at the time. We start seeing new gadgets happen here as well, in terms of different things come around. Okay, we start seeing new inventions, things like refrigerators and radios. Okay, all these new Americans things that people started making cars. Well, how do you pay for it? New thing came out that was called buying on credit. You have a credit card today. You buy it now, you pay it back later on with interest. It's the only way a lot of people had the money to buy all these new goods. And so people are buying all this stuff, give the impression the economy was doing really, really good because people were getting all this new stuff. The idea of buy now, pay later is very dangerous because all of a sudden you buy all this stuff, you got to pay it back in somehow. And sometimes, people even would buy things like land or stocks, and it's called buying on margin. So you bought on margin, I borrow money and use that money to buy stocks or buy land, and that actually drove up the price. A lot of people jumped on the stock market trend and tried to make money in the stock market versus, say, with a job, that kind of stuff. So a lot of people invested in the stock market, and it really changed kind of how people made money. It's also dangerous, though. It's also very risky, both buy on credit and buy stocks, those kind of things. So sometimes stocks could drop. If you buy someone credit, maybe you lose your job, can't pay it back. So it kind of set up this very uneasy situation in terms of the economy. It looked really, really good, but things weren't really that great yet. You saw things change in farms, okay? New things like brand new tractors, harvesting equipment, seed drills and planters made farming a lot easier. Also, still a high grain price due to World War I yet. And so farmers started cranking out all kinds of production. Here's the problem, though. When you start seeing production go up, prices go down. And so farmers will have all this land, all this new equipment on credit, and prices start going down. Potentially, it could be a very, very bad situation for farmers. We're going to stop here for part 1. Check out the next YouTube video for part 2. It'll be positioned right into this one in Schoology. We'll come back in 1 second, guys. Thanks a lot.